Hi, everyone.
What's up, Danny?
Hey everyone.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
Erica, looks like you're walking.
I am. I was just doing a female undergrad panel with Melissa in the Durrell Center. So walking back to my office, trying to inspire the next generation of engineers to stick through the pain.
Did it work? Did they look inspired?
I don't know. Luckily, there's another panel after me, so maybe they'll do some cleanup work.
I know, I'm like, oh, don't let me tell you the truth. Well, hey everybody. I'm gonna stay on mute a lot of the time because I just gave an exam. Now I'm in a coffee shop. I just needed to collect my wits. I'm not sure there are any wits left to collect though. So, what is a wit anyway? Sounds like a grain, right? It sounds like you could harvest it. Hey, pie. Hey, so first thing I wanted to do today is try to fill up April because we have a in-person meeting at the end of or sometime in I think the second week of May. Christian said he'd be a little late today. Um, and I'm gonna announce a slight change to today's schedule, so that'll take one of the meetings. But I think we have a few left, two or three to fill in. And I was just wondering if folks had adjacent projects or things on this project that they wanted space and time for. And I'll tap people otherwise, but thoughts. We had Erica, you've done your bit. Pi seems to have disappeared. I was just about to ask him because I know he does uh a lot of different projects. So and then Marilee, I know that you've been involved in communication stuff, and I don't know if that's still going on, but very frequently you try to you bring up stuff where you're like, yeah, we did this thing, and I'm like, oh, really? You did? I would like to hear about that. So and then I'm sure there's people who've done things that I'm not calling out. Ellis and you always have your fingers in a lot of pies. So I'd like to hear about those and hear about, you don't have to, we're not trying to fill time. We're trying to make sure Sapphire's folks are aware of other things that they should know about that might be adjacent. I mean, maybe Merrily Ellison and then if Pie comes back, we can hear from him. Is are there projects that we should know about that would inform what we do or how we're thinking?
Do um I could talk, well, maybe. I mean, I'm just trying to, honestly, as chair, I haven't been doing as much as I would normally be doing of research, so that is a little limiting, but well, not a little limiting, it's a pain in the ass. Um uh there are some projects where, I mean, the stuff I could talk about would be more associated with what we've noticed does encourage behavior change in, like when you build some awareness of like air, heat, some stuff like that. I would be actually talking a little bit about one of my PhD students who's graduating soon, some of the work she's done and I've helped with. It's not associated with indoor air, it's more outside stuff. So that's the difference. It would be, in that realm, but it's a little bit about like how people think about double risks, like heat and smoke. Um, she's done some work there. I I've been on a study that looked at dog owners, and what how they think about it, and how they think about it for their dog. So again, it's that using the dog as a way to protect a human too. So I could do something associated across a few studies, but it is all going to be outside and not indoor stuff for what that's worth.
But I think that's really useful. I think what, so the particular bit that Sapphires does is a niche, and we're not, we're always going to have to translate findings, I think.
Yeah.
If you'd be willing to do that, and if this is, I mean, this must be a horrible time of year for department heads. So I'd love to include it in sometime in April or that first week of May. If you want to do it but feel this is a bad time, then I'm also open to putting it on later.
I mean, I think the first week of May would work for that because if I can survive April, May's a piece of cake. Um, and it's not that bad. I'm being dramatic. It's Friday. It's been a fun
No,
week. Um,
no, it's like exactly how I feel. That's why I'm not in Powerhouse, and I went to a coffee shop and I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna have coffee, right?
yes. But yeah, I could do that. I could do that first week of May. That would work, and I can just kind of bring some stuff from two or three other studies that has come together. And Ellison, depending on what you're thinking about, maybe I don't know if you want to share stuff with the oh yeah, the health box. That would be totally cool. Um, so that answers my question. I was wondering if you were going to talk at all about that project in the workplace, because that's another thing I might bring in just from the standpoint of, again, people in different roles and how they think about their risks. But it sounds like, Ellison, you're going to talk more about maybe the home health box.
I don't remember if I presented on that to this group, but I could present on April 24th. I'm actually out for the next two meetings. I think I put in the schedule, but the we're about finished with a paper for that project. And for those that maybe it doesn't jog any memory, we measured indoor air quality in people's homes and gave them that information. And then measured how indoor air quality changed, if it did. We also did some measures of engagement with indoor air quality, intention to take action. Those results are pretty ready to present, so I could do that. But I'm out of town for workshop conferences the next two Fridays. Like totally unavailable. So
I think that sounds great. Because I think when we've talked about the kinds of projects that we could do going forward, we're very often thinking about what would be good ideas. But I think that since we began the project, others of us and other people in the field have brought forward some kinds of work that we should also be building upon. And so this idea of dual risks, Marilee, I think it informs like everything, right? It informs that everything that we do. Okay. May 1st, but not May 8th. Yeah. So Marilee, we had planned the May 8th I think for in-person meeting, unless I got it wrong and it was no, that the week after would be graduation.
Okay, yeah, I have
Yeah.
a dissertation thing on the 8th, that I can't move, but the first I could do if that does work. And I could look at that idea of the dual risks and what we've seen and bring in one other thing that is starting to suggest another thing that influences people's willingness to protect themselves. That's from my graduate students' dissertation, which is kind of nifty.
Yeah, that's great. And it doesn't even have to be very formal, right? You can make slides if you want, if it helps you talk, but even if you just have like 6 big bullet points, I think that would generate discussion for an hour, right? And Ellison, if you want to take the 24th, I saw some of your home health box results when we did that event that Milena put on, or that Milena was
Mhm.
involved with, and that I don't remember who organized it now. But I'm not sure that everybody saw it, and I'm not sure that you included everything that you would bring to this group.
Okay, yeah, I just couldn't remember at this point
It would have been only whoever attended
that thing. And I
that
think that might
event
have
with the
just been
city.
you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm good with that. So
Okay.
then, the presentation that Danny was gonna give today, we're not quite ready with it. What we found is that of the two drivers of natural infiltration, um, Stack, Dom took the easy part, and then Danny's been fighting with wind and the way that it's currently represented. We're trying to draw a bridge, and the bridge might have two ends, but it doesn't quite have the middle yet. So, so I'd like to put that off, but I think we're really, really close, if that's okay. So how about the 17th for that, Danny? Because I think it needs more than a week. Cool. So then that just leaves next week that we don't have. And is there, Pi, I was going to ask you, are there any projects that you do? Because I have no idea what you do in the rest of your life. I mean, other than stay away from football fans. And so as you've watched what we do, have you thought about like, oh, this is super relevant, or this kind of thing, or is it just like, oh, these people know, they're different animals. So I'm curious about that.
So I'm kept quite busy with uh dividing my time between here and Google, so I don't complain with lesser work. I just do what's required of me, and then when there's downtime, I just savor it.
Well, I was thinking more of other projects that you do that might be relevant.
Uh Not that I can think of any at the moment. In terms of sapphires.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you do happen to think of something, even if you think it's not relevant, feel free to run it by me, because I'm pretty sure that we learn from a lot of different things. And so it's not, it may be more relevant than you think.
Sure. Yep.
And then, uh, Danny, Whitney, I haven't really tapped you guys, and Paul, I tapped you for today, so I didn't ask you either, but I know that you do things that are not that, like in your other life and before parallel. Um, if there's anything that you would ever like to bring to the group, you can raise it now, or you can let me know on the side.
I'm happy. I have so many slide decks I could give off the cuff. So if we want something, if you'd like, I'm happy to present on some of my non-CSU work and research. And especially because they're kind of hibernating isn't the right word, and dead isn't the right word. But the SBIR grant that was funding them is done, and SBIR is kind of in weird limbo. So I'm happy to give that too.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. So I also didn't want to overload you because you're nearing the end of the semester, and I asked you for this presentation. But I'd be happy to pencil it in maybe later in May sometime. So let's talk
Definitely.
about that.
Yeah. We could also, just another thought, we also have the data or the presentation that Will gave to CIHA back in October on the preliminary results from the 3D printing thing. So I haven't done much work with the 3D printing thing, but I know that Will has that presentation. To put
Yeah,
you on the spot, Will.
I didn't ask Will because of his sort of limbo position. But so okay, so those are things to be considered, and I'm gonna put them on like farther down the I think we have a topic suggestion list. Thank you, everybody, for playing in. I still don't know what we might do next week, but I'll come up with something. Danny, I'm gonna pass it to you so you can do the your getting to know you questions. And then Paul will be talking about a project that he's been involved in and has recently presented on.
Okay, so one of my favorite questions to ask people to get to know them better is what is the smallest hill that you will die upon? And it doesn't have to be a hill that you will die upon, but it is the smallest hill that you will fight vehemently upon. So if anyone wants to go first, I will also just choose people at random.
Yeah, why don't you put an order in the chat?
Okay. So we'll do here the first three. So Will, if you want to kick us off.
I have to go first. So is a peeve like would that count?
Depends if you would die for it.
Um, oh yeah. Uh, can I go last?
Yeah, we'll let you go last just this once, Will, okay?
Thanks.
So I think Paul's next.
Right, good coffee.
I like yours a lot, Paul. I'm gonna say holding my ground against a faculty member who doesn't want to do a really trivial thing that I really think they should do because it's only fair. And that I could easily give to somebody else, but I'm like, no, damn it, you're gonna do it. And I can wait them out, usually.
Is I can think of many, but one of them is like cheaper parking lots, maybe. I don't know. I'm having a lot of trouble finding cheap parking lots right now. Spending like 325 a month for parking is just killing me.
I will let you do a top three if you want to keep going.
Oh yeah, also the best oat milk brand, I don't know. I just can't take any other oat milk at the moment apart from Califia. So like everything else tastes like trash. So yeah. Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. I'm gonna stop.
Mine is when people use the phrase and stuff in conversation, like when they run out of things to say. And what's even worse is sometimes I say it and like the self-loathing I feel for like 3.5 seconds is very intense.
Let's see. I think Marilee will not like me for this one since, that little editor inside of her, but I think there's no reason why there should be both the word affect and effect in the English language. No one knows the difference, and it is ridiculous.
That's fun.
I was gonna say, all right, all one word is not a word. That I don't know if I would die for that one though, but yeah, there's no, okay. So if we get into language stuff, we could be here for a really long time. And I was trying to think of something that was like less trivial, but I have this group guidance document, and at the end is like a whole freaking page of writing peeves. And so maybe those are the hills that I will die on, or perhaps it is the students that the hill that my students will kill me on.
Oh, I don't think mine's a word thing. It's the Oxford comma. I'll die on that hill every day.
I'll die on that hill with you, Allison.
Like that you need it.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, anybody that wants to say otherwise, I will not battle you now.
Hey, Ganesh, I take that really personally because nobody's calling me Whitney, okay? Um, Here is the hill that I will die on. Flossing is essential to our health. And I don't think that it is emphasized nearly enough by medical professionals. And it's a big burden for dentists to be carrying alone. So that is a hill I'm willing to die on.
It gets back to me. So I
Okay,
actually have
Phil.
yeah, Wilhelm. That was actually somebody I was stationed with called me Wilhelm all the time as a little inside joke to a show that he and I both liked. But anyway, so two things, and one of them is maybe it's more of a peeve, but like and I think Whitney's laughed at me about this before, but they recently put that walkway, like the little pavers, to the diagonal of the powerhouse. It drives me effing crazy when people take diagonals instead of just going to the end of something and then turning. It just makes me so mad. It's mostly just walking through grass. Like grass is not to be walked through, like a yard, like manicured grass. So it just makes me mad as a former landscaper. And then the hill I will die on is saying "oh" when it's supposed to be a zero. That also is like, I do not like that. So it's like, I have people say like, "oh, 500" or like, "oh, whatever," like for instead of like zero, whatever. So that's just like one of those things. Like numbers and letters should not be mixed. Yes, it is, Whitney.
Well, thanks, Danny. I think we've now learned that we're annoying each other all the time. Um, so Paul has graciously agreed to talk about a project in Chicago that he's been involved with.
I need hearing to be turned on.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I've not been able to manage this every time since they changed the interface. Like, it is so bad because I don't know what to do. And even though I've still done it, share settings, those tools, there we go. Okay. I will die on the hill that people should not change their interfaces, especially during the semester.
All right. So, this is a project that's not residential. Our group in Illinois was brought in. So Cook County is the county that Chicago is in. And within Cook County, there are two government structures. One is the city of Chicago, and then there is Cook County, which is everything other than the city of Chicago. And Cook County includes all the Chicago suburbs. Um, so the Cook County government declared indoor air quality in public buildings a public health crisis. Having declared it a public health crisis, it was something they then had to do something about. So our team was brought in with the idea that we could help them address how to make their Cook County public buildings have better indoor air quality. Um, so, so we got brought in and they provided us with a list of over 100 buildings, ranging from Department of Corrections guard houses of like 200 square feet up to the county building, which is over 600,000 square feet. So then the question was, what are we going to do first? So the first two buildings we did, they're adjacent to each other around a parking lot, are these Jefferson Whitcomb buildings that are on the title slide here. We chose these buildings because for two reasons. One, their size was tractable. The Whitcomb building is about 23,000 square feet, and the Jefferson building is about twice that. So, yeah, they're still a lot bigger than a house, but they're not 600,000 square feet. The other reason is because the Cook County government every year, for the last several years at least, has done a survey of people who work in their public buildings to ask them a number of questions, one of which is about indoor air quality. And these two buildings routinely were near the worst rated buildings. So we decided that let's do buildings that are small enough to work in and which have some of the worst indoor air quality as rated by the people who work there. Now, that doesn't mean that the indoor air quality is bad. There's some amount of perception, but there's perception in all buildings. These are routinely rated poorly. So let's try to figure it out. So one of the interesting things is, so the Jefferson building is the sheriff's building. And the Whitcomb building also has some sheriff's offices, as well as public records. So we ended up walking around doing things in the sheriff's building and the public records building. These are Maywood, Illinois, which are a western suburb of Chicago. So we did blower door tests in these homes or in these buildings. And you can see unlike the single fan test that we are doing in all of our Sapphires houses, we had these stacks of three or in some cases two fans. This is the larger one of the two buildings. We had three fans in the front door, three fans in this going into this corridor with this back door to the parking lot open. So we did the test. In the other building that was a little smaller, we only used 5 fans. I'm going to skip past some of these. As Tammy said, I just gave this presentation. I gave it to Cook County. I'm not going to spend the whole time going through everything with you, and I decided not to edit the presentation. I'm just going to skip some slides. But these are the things that we measured. We were using a device called AtmoCube to measure temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, PM2.5, formaldehyde, total volatile organic compounds. And then they also provided NOx index and an IAQ index. And so each of these buildings had a basement and 2 levels above grade. And so we put 6 devices in each one of these buildings. And so like here in the Jefferson building, that's the sheriff's building, this is the evidence room. Yes, we are monitoring the indoor air quality in the sheriff's evidence room. And then this is like a little recording studio. And we've got a conference room over here. And then we couldn't access the left side of this building. That was, one of the folks who works there's like, nope, I don't care who they are. They're not coming into my suite of offices. So we couldn't really get into there. And then we had a few other, this is the 911 call center where we put one of our indoor air quality devices, then out in the hallway. And then this is kind of like a bunch of the deputies have just work out of this room. Then in the other building, the smaller building, we had one down in the basement. Let's see, a chat item came in. Oh, really? That's interesting. And then some other, like the records division open offices over here. This one says revenue tobacco open office. I think that's an outdated label. Anyway, so going through, we now have like a month and a half of data from each one of these. One of the things we find is that for the most part, relative humidity tends to, on average, be low. It's also, wintertime. Wintertime levels tend to be low. We also see that sometimes it gets quite high, and most of it is really driven by outdoors, but we see these spikes. And then we have daily VOC trends. One of the things we identified is there's this one room, and I think this was the 911 call center, if I remember correctly, that every day at about 5:45, there's this huge spike. And so we don't know exactly the nature of it. You know, is it the janitor coming in and cleaning things? Is it that everybody in that, or a lot of people in that office really like to bring in those things that have those pleasant scents or whatever? But we see that we also see in other buildings a fair bit of increase. But you know, on average, levels weren't huge, but we see these big spikes, and we know that some chemicals, it's not the average that's the issue. It's more of an acute triggering issue. Carbon dioxide, we see that. So it's common to think of around 1,000 or 1,100 as if you can keep it below that, then it's sufficiently ventilated. And what we see is that here, this is the smaller one of the two buildings. For the most part, levels stay well below. Is anybody not familiar with a box plot and what it shows? Please say so I can make sure that everybody knows, but I don't want to waste my time if everybody knows how to read a box plot. Okay, I've given long enough, I think, and nobody said they don't know how to read a box plot. We split it between weekdays, weeknights, and weekends. Weekends, it's always low because it's much less occupied. It's not unoccupied, it's a sheriff's building. You know, the sheriff's office doesn't totally shut down for the weekend because things still happen on weekends. But we really see the influence of occupancy, and especially we see some very high levels in this conference room. Not as typical, but still get to be, you know, periods of you know, incidents of like when there's a conference room or a conference meeting in the conference room where it will spike. And we see that, yeah, every day some of these rooms just get much, much higher. Um, we also had this thing, you know, we're looking at PM 2 point, whoops, went ahead, didn't want it to. Looking at PM 2.5, and if we zoom in to where the scale is only up to 4 micrograms per cubic meter, almost all of the data are there. There's not very much above 4 micrograms per cubic meter, but we had this one event that went up to like 800 micrograms per cubic meter in the conference room in the sheriff's building. Well, when we had our meeting with the county on Tuesday, they said, yeah, somebody had an adverse microwave incident in the conference room, and the sheriff's department called the fire department. Now, presumably, it was really easy to do so because the call center is on the same floor. The 911 call center is on the same floor. I mean, they could have just run down there and said, "Hey, get the fire department." But yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. We see still the same kind of weekend, weeknight, weekday. One of the things that was really important about this was, I think some of you, you know, if you've worked with buildings people, facilities people, you'll know. I think Will, you probably will, and Allison from all the CDPHE, when you go in and start measuring stuff in buildings that other people manage, they tend to default to a position of defensiveness. They really, it's like, who is this person coming in to tell me that I'm doing a lousy job maintaining these buildings? And so they tend to default to having a lot of excuses, a lot of reasons why any issue is not their fault. And so, you know, one of the things that was complained about with this building was dustiness and just that kind of general feel. And of course, people can't see PM 2.5, but so one of the things was, well, you know, there's this across the street, there's a parking lot that's kind of between all the buildings, but then across the street, there's another parking lot, and that's where all the guests come. Only the workers get to park in the paved parking lot. The one across the street is all dirt. It's a dirt parking lot, and it is on the west side. So if you have a prevailing westerly wind, then they're speculating that that's not our fault. It's just that we have this dirt parking lot. And we say, look, particle levels tend to be low, but occasionally they get high. Um, and so, you can't just blame it on the parking lot. And we do see, even though levels don't get high, and as a typical case, we do see that effective occupancy here. And so that showing these data, I think, really helped to convince folks that they can't just always blame something else. One of the things I also did at the beginning of this presentation for the Cook County folks on Tuesday was say, look, part of the issue is these buildings are old and they were not designed to current codes. We're here to try to understand what things are issues and what we might be able to work on together to make things better. And I feel like that approach kind of took down some of that defensiveness. This is showing for that one room where we had that huge PM event. This is zoomed in for just kind of that event. And it was interesting because it coincided with this big formaldehyde spike as well. Now, I'm not exactly sure what it was that was on fire in the microwave and why exactly that would produce formaldehyde, but it seems to have. We found that there were only about, yeah, I'm guessing plastics, but I don't know what they were burning, and we did not inspect the microwave to know anything, but that's probably what it is. So, not a lot of events where the 24-hour NACS level for particles was exceeded, but they're listed here. They tended to be more concentrated in specific rooms. We also showed how, in this, these are both from the smaller building. We have one PM event in one of the rooms. We see a clear spike and a gradual decay. And then another one that seems to be really affected by the operation of the HVAC system. This cycling is really aligned with the HVAC system. And this shows, all contaminants at that same period in that room. And we see that the HVAC system is, every time it comes on, the levels, I'm not sure whether the levels are going up or going down when the system comes on, probably coming down. There's probably something that's resulting in greater ventilation in those rooms, resulting in levels going down. And then when it shuts off, the levels go back up, but I'm not entirely positive of that. So, yeah, I think a lot of so I'm going to go on to another thing here in a moment, but one of the things that I think is really valuable about this, I mean, this is a situation where, like, if we were doing a research project, we'd make pretty much the same measurements. This was not intended as a research project, but we still did kind of the same thing. And having these data and being able to present them to the county folks, I think in terms of having that application and the interest of people who are not scientists and experts in this area, I think this really helped them understand, like, some of what's real and some of what's not real in terms of things that they need to focus on. But so I'll pause for just a moment here before I move into the next section. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, but I want to see if there are any questions about the IAQ measurements. Tammy?
I don't have questions about the measurements, but one of the reasons I was interested in this, and also interested in Ellison and Will, the project that you did with commercial buildings. I would say that from a research perspective, each individual building is, maybe only of a little interest, or it's a case study interest. But I'm beginning to feel like we're moving from let's measure all the indoor air quality to how do we quickly identify indoor air quality problems and provide people with actionable information, or be able to automatically diagnose it and include it in an automated response. Right. I feel like we're kind of moving into a new era of what to do with indoor, and like not every place has problems. And so I'm looking at these results um and all of our phase one results and so on from that point of view. Like, yeah, just so that's just the
And
thought. I don't have a question.
okay, and in this last section that I've got here, I'm really going to be hitting on kind of exactly that kind of thing. So we also assessed all the rooftop units. The larger building had about 20, the smaller building had about 11 rooftop units. They were all 5-ton air conditioners with electric resistance heating. I thought they would be 5-ton heat pumps. Most of them are like 4 years old, and 4 years ago, they bought a bunch of 5-ton units that are air conditioners with electric resistance heating, maximizing the amount of money they spend on the operational. It might have been cheaper to install, but they were absolutely, it's the most expensive way to heat. So one of the things we wanted to do was assess the airflow through the systems, because that has an implication for the efficiency and ability to dehumidify in the summer, things like that, and filter air. And then we also wanted to get a sense of how much outdoor air they were bringing in. So the photo on the right is us using these flow plates to try to measure the amount of air coming in through the outdoor air intake. The photo on the left shows there were about half a dozen or so of the 20, of the what, 30-ish units that had filters that were like this. They were installed poorly. They were kind of intentionally curved like this. It's like they couldn't quite fit it in properly, so they just shoved it in so that there were filters in. But the you talk about bypass. This is doing basically nothing to filter air. So if the filters were supposed to be doing something to get rid of some, particles that are coming from outside, um, this isn't helping. It really isn't. Um, And so, like in the larger building, the sheriff's office building, the new ones, which is everything but these two, numbers 1 and 18 are older units. The newer ones are all supposed to have almost 2,000 CFM. We didn't measure the flow in every single one of them, but you can see none of them get close to that almost 2,000 CFM. These are all, they're as you get a little bit lower, it can help a little bit on dehumidification at the beginning, but then you start to lose it. So in the summertime, these are all flows that are lower than it's supposed to be for dehumidification. And so they are going to have some issues with dehumidification in the summer. We also found that the supply pressures were all very high, much higher than the return pressures, with only a couple of exceptions. So the supply sides tended to be fairly restricted. And that's part of why the flows were low, because it was fighting against these high pressures. Um, and then in the other building, it's a similar thing. You see, it's basically the same units, and we see again these low flows. And here, it's not as striking on the supply pressure versus return. In fact, we've got, this one unit number 9 where it's the return that's just really ridiculous. Although on number 11, the supply is very high. But one of the things we also found was that most of these outdoor air intakes, like here on the right, were closed. So, no outdoor air being brought in. Well, one of the things that the folks explained to us was that, yeah, these units are sized to only be able to kind of handle down to like 10 degrees Fahrenheit. They had a cold winter, and every time it gets really cold, the systems can't keep up. And if they have the dampers open, that just increases the load even further. And it's just they're not going to be able to keep the buildings warm. So they have to close them. But these do not have any kind of automated system. So if they're going to close them, the engineer has to go up onto the roof and manually close every single one of them. And if they're going to open them, they have to go back up onto the roof every single time and open them. And so the engineer, who initially had been very defensive, looked at our results and said, this is the kind of stuff that I need to advocate for a building automation system that we can maybe also incorporate some kind of like CO2 demand response, so that instead of having it be where every time we want to open the damper, somebody has to go up, we could say every hour purge for 15 minutes and get some ventilation. Or when there's a conference going on, a meeting going on, and the CO2 levels are going on, bring it on without having somebody have to go up onto the roof. So he was actually getting really interested in this. Another thing we found, we looked at bathroom ventilation in the bigger building. In every single bathroom, we got 0 measured ventilation in every single bathroom. In the smaller building, the men got about 10 CFM for the entire like 2-stall bathroom. Women got nothing. Standards say it should be 50 CFM per stall. So normally it should have been like 100 CFM to 150 CFM. And instead it was 0 if you were female, 10 if you were male and in one of the buildings. 0 if you're male in the other one of the buildings. And so, what we found is we didn't have any constant contaminant sources, but there were occasional spikes. The parking lot couldn't really be pointed to as a significant source. Buildings are underventilated, bathrooms are underventilated, and the supply systems are restrictive. But I think to, what Tammy was saying, we've kind of identified now some of, what are the real things and what are the not real things. And that building automation, if they get good building automation where they can really make sure to ventilate through those outdoor air intakes reliably, and if they can get some decent ventilation in the bathrooms, maybe address some of the duct systems, they could really make, I think, a very meaningful change. So we're in the process of writing up the report that's going to have these recommendations. And when we got done with the meeting on this, kind of a prove it, they brought us in, they believed we could do it, but this was where we actually showed whether we could do it. At the end of the meeting on Tuesday, the woman who was leading the charge from Cook County said, let's get a meeting set up for next week so we can talk about getting these kinds of data for all the rest of the buildings. So they found this to be really valuable, helping drive decisions and improvements, having the kind of data they need to be able to try to make buildings better, and they like where it's going. So I will pull up there. That was my last slide. I'll keep the slide deck up in case anybody has a question that I need to go back to a slide for.
Marily's got a question in the chat.
Yeah, what was the impetus for them to declare indoor air quality a problem? That's a really good question. And I know that in Chicagoland, there's been a lot of concern about schools. And I think one of the things that happened was they know that people have complained. And it's kind of like there were a couple of people who really believed in this, who had the ear of Cook County council members and advocated for it. It was basically a lobbying effort, maybe an unofficial lobbying effort, but getting people who believe that maybe this is something we should really focus on. So I don't know why Cook County, as opposed to say LA County or somewhere else that did it, but it really was just matching persuasive, concerned citizens and politicians willing to listen.
It's just really interesting because I thought you would say, oh, there was this big event or there was another with a microwave in an office or something that that caught someone's attention and they went, oh crap. It does sound like, yeah, you've got someone there who, like when we think of, just to put it back in the land I live in, like stages of change, and that they wanted to, they're contemplating doing something, they want to know more, do they need to do something, but you're taking advantage of an opportunity, and you guys had the ability to easily respond to that need that they had, and then you can translate it into, well, here's what you can do And, kind of, Ellison, it kind of well, it doesn't kind of, it reminds me of what the stuff you do when you go in and you look at someone's home and say, well, here are places where it's a little funky. Here are things that you can do. And so you give them that action item that they can, and with your stuff, Ellison, where you even talk about cost in some cases, like what's a low cost thing, what's a little bit more cost and so on. I think this approach, um, is a really nice way because they're already interested, and then you give them things that they can do. They feel comfortable. They're happy. You're happy. It's a win-win.
Yeah, and one of the things I didn't really focus on, but I will share, you look at this, we put out these Atmo Cube indoor air quality monitors. The intention is that they stay. And there's the links that the buildings folks can go and look and see what are the data, what's going on with these buildings, where do we see issues? And so one of the parts of this project is to not just do this, but to develop training materials and users guides so that we leave their on-site facilities folks with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to take ownership of these issues and not have to call somebody like us every 10 years to see if there's a problem, but give them the resources and knowledge to be able to use these things and say, looks like something's going on. Maybe they still need to go get somebody else to help, but they don't have to wait 10 years or wait for a serious event. We're really trying to empower them to take control of their own indoor air quality.
Yeah, now I'm super curious, like to have like a panel with Alice and Will on the commercial project they did in Colorado because I I it's not that all commercial buildings are the same, but they're of course they're like vastly different. Um but I feel like this so what is um it's less in that you should buy a widget, like maybe they should buy our intervention, but more in the just general awareness of like, oh yeah, you can do something. And that feels very unresearchy sometimes. Um, but I do think that there's a gap between what we might propose as a good research question and just actually making a difference for the people who actually have poor indoor air quality. So I feel like that's a discussion I'd love to engage Ellison in too, just because you've done so much measurement around Colorado, and then like, what do you think after all these years, right? So just having and just having a discussion about like, where are we now? What do we offer?
Is the we research?
Um, it can, you know, it's like whoever's in it now, wait, the people who come to this call
Mm.
are researchers. And so we can't pretend to have a discussion that is not research because we are. Um, but yeah, I just feel like I guess I'm not really sure how to position ourselves, and I think we can have more of an idea about that. Right.
So,
Before it was like we don't know much about indoor air quality. Now it's like, yeah, we kind of know. And sometimes there's a bad problem. And a lot of times there's not.
so I
So
mean, I think of this as a lot like what Ellison and Will did on the CDPHE, going around and trying to understand what's going on in individual buildings. And like, in Illinois, for those of you may not know, had both a training team and a research team. This is really being done by the research team, although we had training team folks involved with the building to get the testing done. And yeah, the research team, of course, they want to do research and they want to have papers and stuff like that. And my argument is, like, what would we have measured differently? We probably wouldn't have measured much of anything differently. We might have done a survey to try to really pinpoint where in the building people thought there were issues, but mostly we'd make the same measurements. And if Cook County has us do 100 public buildings you know what? We're going to have done a research project. We're going to see trends. We're going to have things we can talk about in journal articles. That wasn't the initial reason. It's something that just comes along with what we're doing. And to me, I really like that kind of thing. I like when we're doing things that are both research and helping us understand and being able to immediately translate to impact and improving people's lives. That's kind of the magic place for me. That's which has me super excited about this project.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, I'd say I'm really curious about, they've got this stuff now, and are they going to follow through? Have they assigned it to a person? Are they going to report occasionally that the sustainability of what you've set up for them? Because that, thinking about you've essentially given them an intervention. And thinking about now, how will that intervention be taken up and how will it be used and how long will they do those things? Those are the things that now I'm like, oh, this is cool. You've got this thing you've got in there and you could do follow up and we could see, is it automated enough for them? Do they need, what would help them to still kind of make decisions based off of it or be able to tout the fact that, hey, this is a good thing about working in our buildings. We have good air because that does, I mean, having lived in Clark as long as I have, a building that we've had a recent mice takeover, but it's under control as I look at the two traps in my office that are now non-mouse occupied, which is a good sign. But I know that over the long term, folks in different places at CSU have been upset about the quality of the building that they're in and worried about that. So I think the human side comes in to me at this point and has some really cool things about the practical side of that human side.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question, Marilee. And we haven't developed the training materials yet, so we haven't really done that full handoff yet for them to take ownership. But that's in the plan, right? And I think it will be interesting to the extent that we can understand that. It would be very interesting to get a handle on how do they use it and how long do they use it.
Yeah, no, so to me like you said, there's this other set of questions now that can be looked at that could come back and address some of the ways that um, stuff is measured, not from the science of how you measure it, but like how you involve the organization in the measuring and how that you get buy-in from them and motivation and things that could further ensure that you would have some outcome from that science or from the information that you've helped them to gather. Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
we're over time,
yeah, we're
so
over time. So yeah, anyone else who has questions can write to Paul, but thank you for sharing.
yep.
Yeah, I like learning about your project. Thanks, Paul.
Good to see everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.